Welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to talk with Sid today. He inspires me as an executive who has been really having an impact on the world that he touches, whether it's a customer, an employee, or his colleagues in his extraordinary global brand as a company. And so, Sid, it's been delightful to get to know you better and to have a conversation about leadership and your remarkable journey. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your journey has been in terms of where you started and where you are today as an executive, as you introduce yourself to the other chief executives who are listening to this broadcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me first. So my journey, pretty briefly, so I was born in India, New Delhi, spent most of my schooling there, went to IIT Madras for my bachelor's and master's in bioengineering. Happened to build a small startup there that was into consulting, biotech and medical devices company. So was a bit entrepreneurial early on. Joined Novartis in 2017 in India as a role of innovation executive, basically responsible for driving a bunch of innovation projects at our global drug development office in India and Hyderabad. From there onwards, based on successes of a couple of projects that I've been doing, I was promoted to the head of strategy of a program called Data 42, which is Novartis's moonshot of bringing together its 2 million years of data. And I was the first employee of this program. So it's been a remarkable journey, and we are almost 3 years in now. A lot has been done and achieved.
You know, it's really quite remarkable when an executive like yourself rises so quickly through your entire career and within the company that you are today, and then gets tasked for doing something that's often an ambition for a company, but really tough to feel comfortable doing, which is in a sense being an entrepreneur and having the courage, frankly, along with the vision to say, I want to think about how this impact could be of our business if we were to harvest, in this case, your Data 42 project. Could you talk a little bit about the journey for you and for your colleagues of coming to the conclusion of tasking you with that leadership role and the challenges that might be faced by it?
Sure. Mark, you touched upon a word called courage, and courage is completely stripped of its value if there's no vulnerability. So let me start with vulnerability. As we started out this journey, and especially I'll talk about myself, I think I was about 25 when I joined the program. And there were quite a lot of executives as part of this whole initiative that's a goal and moonshot for Novartis, who've been there for, I would say, at least 1 or 2 decades, very well experienced, highly vetted, industry recognized veterans. So there was a lot of vulnerability for me because, I didn't know it. And, to be honest, it feels a bit prejudiced and, too presumptuous to say that I knew the solution from the beginning. I didn't know the solution, but definitely I had a bunch of questions. And those questions have helped me continuously probe for how can an industry which holds so much value, for our world, for the patients, can be transformed using data, using digital. I'm a biology student, and having had the chance of running some experiments myself, I can make, let's say, miniaturized and very naive translations of what more data can do. I'm sure these people can. So what's blocking them? And where are the barriers? And to be honest, my journey has been of removing very humble barriers from the ways of very, very smart people, which I think a lot of it is around identifying the right problems, diagnosing why they're being caused, and then having the courage and boldness to drive through them. I don't want to strip this of the fact of where coaching and sponsorship plays a role. So I've had a tremendous amount of sponsors, both in terms of my managers and our senior management has been quite encouraging. And as in when we've made these bold moves, we've found a very warm reception and an ability to propagate those bold moves into transformations. And thanks to those transformations, which are not only just my, let's say, ideas and my efforts, but a contribution of many in my team and my peers, that has landed me to the journey where I am, and to the positions that I have. So I wouldn't attribute my position to a journey of how I've become amazing. It's a bit of, I've had the courage of asking the right questions in broad forums. I've had incredibly generous sponsors and peers who've, answered those questions. And I've had tons of luck in finding solutions, which work disruptively.
Sid, I'm inspired by this idea that we all must think about our journey in the context of humility and vulnerability so that we learn faster, better, deeper. And then that ends up being a visceral connection we're making with the people who have recruited us and we've recruited to the journey together. It's a centerpiece of collaboration in the research about this idea that we have to have hubris on the one hand, as my professor at Stanford would say when he was writing Good to Great, Jim Collins, he'd say, we have this, what sounds sometimes like a paradoxical combination of hubris and humility. Hubris saying it is a moonshot and we're doing it. We don't know how. That takes both humility and courage to say we are going to join through our efforts together and through our willingness to learn together, lock arms and make this thing happen. And so I'm inspired to hear you frame it in those terms. In fact, I think when Jim was talking about it, that's what he described as a level 5 leader who could face that vulnerability. When do you feel like you made a connection with that as a safe place to go or an opportunity for you in your career?
Yeah, people who know me well will know that I talk a lot about the journey between the transient and transcendental.
Yes.
And a lot of what I do in life is kind of associated with how I can see the world come together. It gives me a bunch of joy, a lot of passion. I would even say it's my key driver. And to your point, Mark, that having the humility of not knowing, let me take it more selfishly and move it away from humility and say, well, if I really want to discover how the world works, there better be questions to whose answers I do not know. Otherwise, there's no point of going on this journey. And so, over time, as I've seen, pain as an indicator, of telling me, here is a dimension, here is something I don't understand about, how the world works. And as I go through the pain and as we solve those problems, of whose answers we couldn't even fathom, forget we knew, my perspective becomes really enriched. And the next time that problem appears, I feel so gratified, so satisfied, even if it's not necessarily linked to a business objective, it could be a people problem. We understand now that there are people, people have different mindsets, they're wired differently. Some people are into detail, some people are, into the high level. There are people who have certain context at a certain point of time, which is, as the program or the project progresses. So we must talk to all of them at a different, speed, at a different, level of information. Just having this, let's say as a dimension, if I take those two, right?
Yes.
It's so gratifying for me. And time again, as we've solved these problems, better understanding of these dimensions have helped me solve better problems. And in fact, has helped me help other people, which is also very gratifying because that's what they're struggling with. Often, my colleagues or my friends or my peers or people who report to me, get stuck into something. And this is this vicious cycle of trying to, apply what what we call as referential knowledge to something which hasn't been comprehended yet. And it's almost like trying to understand a sphere by drawing a circle, but it's truly not the case. And trying to measure, surface area while you should be measuring for volume. Sorry for talking physics here.
That's okay. It's 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. In this Zoom format, we're getting accustomed to the difference between that connection with the two and the volumetric.
So to summarize, the enriching process of identifying problems that are not solved and hold value for people, then going through the pain myself and with my peers, and through that pain learning what constitutes this and learning new dimensions and better understanding of the relationship with transient and transcendental. That's how at least I've come to embrace the fact of pain and problems I can't answer and come to love them, I would say.
I love the framing of this as the pain and that purpose for it. And you use that term very freely in this process. And I think for some thinkers around the world, many might have this growth mindset that you're describing, which is intensely curious. You're putting intrinsic value on the not knowing. You're putting a lot of importance and meaning into the discovery, which makes you an entrepreneur, an experimenter, a scientist, a spiritualist, a person who's interested in the unknown and bringing that forward to create value for the world and for yourself. And so there's that moment of suspense that you're saying, I don't know. You're also saying that it's painful. So what you're saying is that you're very much attracted to being able to go through the process of adding value in the business or in your life by approaching something that maybe be that big, hairy, audacious goal that you don't know how to solve. And yet, nevertheless, the pain sounds like it's a centerpiece for you. It doesn't, in other words, for some, that would warn them away. Or many types of personalities are just really attached to winning and achievement as quickly as possible. And our quarterly cycle tends to be indexed towards the short term. So this idea of embracing pain and the unknown and the discovery to create long-term value could you unpack that further especially for business people as they bring their humanity to the work?
Sure. Just to also ground myself, I'm sure the pain I've faced is far less than what others have, and also what comes with experience and age. But let me at least detail out what I think, and let my fellows evaluate if it's worth anything. I don't think one can avoid pain. So it's almost like, being. So we are in the world where time is moving. And if I had to start bucketing, right, 3 kinds of, let's say, personalities or 3 kinds of attitudes one could take. Attitude number 1, I have everything that I need. It's great. I don't want to change anything because change may cause pain. Given the forward-moving nature of time, things are changing, and you're trying to stay stationary. That's excellent. I don't know how long that's going to last. And there's going to come a point of time, where your bubble is going to get embraced with reality, which has, greatly changed than where you left it. And that's going to cause pain. And not having the ability to deal with it and to move beyond it is going to, get you into agony over time, and maybe a perpetual agony. So that's just the first attitude. The second attitude of, winning and achieving, also excellent, because it motivates you at least not to be in the state of, let's say, stationary. It's like kinetic energy, versus potential, and takes you from a state of not willing to do anything to at least starting to learn, in the hopes of achieving your goal. But even then, 2 things could happen. One, you achieve your goal, and then you have the pain of, okay, crap, what do I do next? And you'll have to find the next one. That's inevitable. That's the construct of life. And then number 2, you may toil, a lot to get to your goal. And if you really want it, you'll have to embrace that pain. So that's the other part of it. The third is, also, why to make pain the center? Why not to make the goal the center? Just with my better understanding of the transient and transcendental, and some reading in life, I come to realize that outcomes are not my doing only. There are many factors involved: the places, the people, random ideas that pop into my head, so many other things. And sometimes things I wish the way they would happen don't happen. Yeah, and that's a part of life. And so I have to adjust to those situations. Sometimes the goal I thought for myself are the wrong goals. I thought I was going to be in Harvard Business School, 2 years ago. Like, I didn't go there. And I was crying for that goal, and I didn't go there, and I'm so happy I didn't go there. Not that I don't want to, or I think anything bad about Harvard, but it just wasn't the right thing for me, to do in that timeline. And through the process of pain, I've come to realize the next, truth, which I'll have to pursue for, which is, being in my role and, going on this journey of bringing together our, big data across the healthcare sector. So the last attitude you could have is of that no matter what happens, because outcomes are not in your control, you want to learn. You want to learn what happened, and you want to at least come to acceptance, if not at agreement. And that acceptance also takes pain. So no matter which attitude you take, you're going to have to embrace pain. So better have a good attitude towards it, and pain may treat you favorably.
Well, your message comes at a particularly good time, I think, for all of us, as when being in isolation relatively has forced many of us to spend more time with ourselves, who might not have had already the discipline or the attraction to this self-discovery that you're describing in your journey. The people who have been able to be built to last, that have had success that's lasting, take the approach that you're describing so that they can have peace and a sense of purpose and outcomes, because they've made that growth mindset a centerpiece in their life. Can you share with us a time when that principle was upfront and personal for you in your youth or in the present, or can you take us to a place when that was a useful way of thinking about it?
In the early days of the project that I've been working on, because of the fact that some solutions have to fit in an entire ecosystem, in my opinion, there were some choices being made which I didn't agree with personally, and I was really strongly anchored with the success of the project, to say that, okay, this is what I associate myself in life with. This stands for my values, so I want this to be on time, deliver the value it is, and I want to stand behind it. And I could see that some of those choices that were being made could actually derail the time, whether they were of actual consequential matter or not, it remains unsolved because they never happened. And for that specific moment, Mark, I felt, I would say, quite depressed, as a matter of fact. I was like, okay, here I am. I have tons of logic with me, all this data, all this analysis I've done, other people have done, I've brought them together. It's document, clean, crystallized, and beautiful decks. Why don't people get this? This is the obvious choice. This is what makes sense. And that was my illusion that it made sense, because it made sense in my mind. That's all that was happening. And I went through an agony, of I would even say 2 months, where I ended up traveling over, to meet some of my friends and hike in some islands. And while walking, we kind of stumbled upon talking about some philosophy and some philosophical books. And this friend of mine, he's more, let's say, into people and thinks a lot about how people think about him and how people think in general. And he started explaining me, people have their own mindset, and you have to work together. And to me, it became immediately clear that, well, I wasn't thinking about one dimension. That's people. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that we need a solution that everybody can work with to make come true. And that pain, taught me that no matter how right I am or how wrong I am, it's important to think about people as a part of the solution, the stakeholders, for lack of a better word, their incentives, their emotions, their state of mind, their current context, and to bring them along that journey. And what happens henceforth is, I was able to find a solution with the help of some sponsorship as well, that kind of fitted the goals and helped accelerate our journey. And this time, I was, let's say, humble enough to step back and say, guys, I don't understand. So I literally, raised my flags and I said, I don't know how to bring everybody along. Can you help me? Do you believe in this? Yes, I can have this crude conversation with you, but can you help me? And ever since, we've done several of these, let's say, transformations in our program and elsewhere, where we've had to bring, in the order of 30, 40, 50 people, sometimes senior stakeholders, sometimes more, let's say, associate level people. And that's been such an enriching journey. It's become a skill of mine now to, set up war rooms and bring together people on disruptive technology. So that's the little story, if I had to share, by leaving out the details still. How pain has at least morphed me in one instantiation, and how I saw that it was my own roadblocks that caused that agony. And, moving beyond that roadblock has given me tremendous value and allowed me to bring a lot of prosperity to my organization and to my friends.
It's a brilliant way to frame it, Sid, I think, because we can all relate to finally having the blessing of a conviction to do something. And then the surprise of how it's in our head and not anybody else's until we encourage them or find a way to frame it, or as you said earlier, bridge to where their heads are at so that we can harvest this choir of voices to create music together. And it's like the conductor can't turn the sound off or not hand out the song sheets or listen to the better interpretations that everybody else is having of that piece of art. And so I love that story. I think everyone listening today can really relate to it. And I want to lean into this point about engaging the team, which is on everybody's mind, particularly today, to try to keep people engaged, but more importantly, light them up, ignite them around the idea that you may have or the vision of it without being so directive that we're channeling it. We're not harvesting all they have to offer. And I had the privilege early in my life of learning from and working with Charles Schwab, who I've known for 30 years. And early in his life, he didn't realize he was dyslexic at the time. He now discovered that after he had a child, and the diagnosis of that sort of thing, of those learning differences, became very clear. And it's now become a mission in his life to help people with all kinds of minds and perspectives. So you talk about diverse thinking and getting teams together. That's an interesting way to think about neurology and engaging all kinds of minds in a project. And he was at Stanford, and he got there and thought he was a really smart guy. He was almost kicked out of college twice because he couldn't make the bonehead English. Now, he had people from all over the world who could speak and write English literature. They could write essays much better than he could. And so this was really tough for him because he's smart in math. He was pretty good at marketing. And he realized his actual special gift was making things simple enough so that everyone could understand. In fact, that would become part of his brainchild when he created Charles Schwab and Company, because he was one of the few people at Stanford Business School who came out thinking about the team and how he was a facilitator and coach for a team, because he had learned very quickly he wasn't the smartest guy in the room at everything. That's not what this is about. It's about engaging all those kinds of minds. Could you talk a little further about that process then that you've mentioned about being able to bridge to the many different types of people that are needed and who show up, especially with all the cultures that you're sitting in Switzerland right now, and you're lighting up the whole world in this conversation?
Absolutely. And I think before I go and talk about it, it's kind of important to highlight, like, why is it hard to think about it?
Thank you.
Because in the context of solving problems, Mark, at least in my world, right? The first order things that come to mind of, let's say, at least for me and many of the people I know, is, okay, what are we building? What's the solution? The next order of things that come to people's mind is, well, what is actually the problem? Who's the customer and what's the pain? I know it's a bit out of sequence, but that's how thoughts start to occur, at least for me.
Sure, absolutely.
And then comes, okay, can I deliver this, in time, with money? Can I meet the milestones and everything else, right? Only then you come to realize, oh no, actually, I'm going to be ending up delivering the solution with people, right? Who are going to build it. There are customers on one end who are going to accept it. There are, regulators, stakeholders, and everybody else who's involved here, who has a role to play in all of this, right? And each of them is coming from their own angle and perspective. And each of them today has a different set of information about the topic you're going to talk about, a different set of impressions and informations about you, and also a different style of consuming information. Right? And I would almost recommend, again, maybe I'm talking to a lot of my younger peers, to say that make that as a part of active problem solving. While science and while technology and while strategy are all critical, actively solving for people, and communication. I think Warren Buffett said this, right? If any skill you could improve with communication, I'd say that's something I fully agree with, because it's not just communicating yourself, but how do you use communication to bring the right people at the right time? What content are you going to give to them? How is it going to be framed? Is this person interested in technical details, or is this person interested in the big picture? Does this person even know anything? Do we have to first meet with this person and just let them vent out and be angry, because that's the moment for this? And then in a couple of days, this is the moment for for them to understand what the details are. So
Love it.
yeah, for me and my team, we've almost had like charts, knowledge graphs of people, and like how people connect with each other and what attributes they hold. And against these knowledge graphs, we've solved. And let me be truly honest. I'm not trying to make myself, the bold hero here that goes into every conversation and just tears it apart. No, our team even divides, who has what conversation, depending on, who is this for? And this is not just based on seniority, but who are you talking to? Is this somebody who wants, a more high level executive language? Is this somebody who really wants to get into the weeds? Is this somebody who loves to, discuss sarcasm? I think all those little details, can play an important role in bringing people along.
I love it. You're showing appreciation for all kinds of minds and all different types of personalities. And that's what's coming together to create the solutions that you're looking for. And it takes a lot of orchestration and a lot of patience to do that.
Yeah, I just want to add to this that I don't think it's an overhead. And that's why I use the word, consider it as a part of active problem solving. It is the process by which your solution truly gets refined, not only to be accepted, but actually solve the problem. Because everything you've dreamt up, or at least for me, everything I've dreamt up in my head is not what it is, that's going to actually solve the problem that many people face. So yes, you have to take out time, and it is very important. And I've come to recognize this, like I said, through the pain and the journey that I've been through.
What I'm so grateful for in your commentary is that anyone who's watching this broadcast has a certain level of ambition to have impact and has already had the privilege of accomplishing that for all sorts of reasons that have to do with the team making it possible, the circumstances, and their own willingness to craft a path on that journey. One of the people that I've talked to recently is Ed Catmull at Pixar, who has these very creative projects like herding cats in so many different fields, and then trying to make up a story and then betting incredible amounts of money on talent and that storytelling capacity to come to solutions. And one of the hacks that he's often talked about is that the process that you're describing, he's compartmentalized, and I'm oversimplifying for him or for what you have to accomplish with the complexity of that solving process. Do you have hacks that allow you to put a frame around each phase of the race? For him, very simplistically, he actually had a different room for the brainstorming, saying, okay, this is where we're ideating. Nobody's going to be shooting down anybody's ideas in this room. This is what's going to be sticky notes all over. And then the next room might be a curation of, okay, now that we've reflected on that, not all of it makes as much sense as it did when I thought about it in the middle of the night, and what's starting to make more sense. And then and they actually have physical spaces. Now, of course, they're in the visual arts business, so that kind of makes sense for him to do that. And it ends up being a very powerful way of getting people through the pipeline to the point where we're in a very different space when we're actually curating, budgeting, processing, and execution. Have you found ways or contexts in which you were able to help people through this process you're describing?
Sure. Depends on what we're trying to solve for. I'll take a very, very simplistic example to elucidate. Let's say when multiple people together are trying to build some sort of a document. And I'm just taking document for the purposes of it's easy to explain. The document needs to have a table of content. It needs to have the content inside it. It needs to be sharp. And all of this needs to mean something. In my world, sometimes I've divided it into 4 phases, if it helps. Yeah. Started with completion. So I said, so of course we've ideated. So we start with the hypothesis first and say, this is our hypothesis of what done looks like if this document is complete. So the table of contents, right? And say, okay, now we've had the chance to ideate, and I've brought together a synthesis of, what it makes sense, and all the responsible parties agree to that. This table of content is comprehensive from their view. Good enough. Okay, let's park this hypothesis. Let's go into completion phase. Let's bring everything that we think belongs, underneath these headings, and what is needed for this document to, be where it is. So all the team does in this period of time is bring together information. And they're not thinking about if this is like, if this is written the right way, if it's the right format. It's just a collection of information, and everybody is working towards that. Then we go into the phase of articulation. Okay, now that we've got everything in there, can we make sure that the stuff we've copied doesn't have brackets? Is written in simple English. These are sentences, and we can understand it. And team takes different components of the document and starts articulating it. As lengthy or as broad it can be. Huge. It can be small. It can be whatever. We don't care about it right now. We know that we brought together all the information, and now we need to just write it down in plain English. And all we need to do is apply English and common sense. Yeah. Phase number 3 is simplification. Great. You wrote a paragraph about something trivial, or let's say something super important, which is 3 pages. Excellent. Nobody will get it. How do we simplify it, right? Which includes, of course, deletion of words and deletion of non-essential content. It's a very reflective process because you spend so much time articulating it. Now you're at a point in time to say, well, I actually know what's not important. I'm going to strike off all these lines and, anchoring back to the point of pain. It does cause pain, because you wrote down all that stuff. And then the last piece of this is meaning. So then we collectively pause, and say, okay, we're trying to say X, Y, and Z using this document or whatever this deliverable is, right? We need to pause and understand if what we are saying makes any sense first, makes sense to us, can be connected, and the way we've written it, is it coming across truly to this entity, to this person, or to this group of people, right? And then we prune it again, for meaning and say, this is not connecting still the dots that we need to, here are the gaps, and we flag it. And we go back again, we start finding the facts to complete it, prune it again, and keep going through these cycles till the document is complete, articulate, simple, and has a lot of meaning to the entity this is being delivered to. I hope that kind of answers what you're trying.
That's absolutely. It's interesting. People really appreciate the opportunity to kind of know what the tool is and also have a sense of what the objective is of being led through a process that is going to be making a difference for folks. So Sid, as you think about the journey that you've taken, what do you wish you knew and would advise yourself as a younger executive to have taken as a development opportunity when you were starting out that today from the journey that you're on?
That's an excellent question, Mark. So first, like I talked about, courage and vulnerability. I wish I knew very early on that empathy is so important. And why is empathy important is we all face vulnerability in our lives. And that's also a bond that connects us. And that's a bond that helps bring people together. And I wish I knew how important it was to connect with people and how important it was to understand their vulnerabilities and to share with them my vulnerabilities. So that's just one. 2, I wish somebody, early on would have taught me that not everything is science and analytics. There's a lot of belief involved. There's a lot of leap of faith involved. I've happened to discover this by actually coming to a point of frustration and saying, I'm just going to jump now and see what happens. I wish somebody had told me early on, there's a lot of leap of faith. And there's a lot of belief in that the world is big enough, and then you meet the right people and there's enough opportunity, a sense of gratitude that you need to have towards your situation and continue to persist as you continue. And the last piece, which I'm still learning, I have to say, is patience and peace. I wish somebody would have told me, when I started out, that it's so important to understand that everything's not in your control. Yeah, I know it sounds obvious, and then life doesn't work like clockwork, as shown everywhere. It works at its own pace, and so having the grounding and the wisdom to let things happen at its own time is important, and pausing deliberately is also important. So the knowledge of the pause, I would say.
I love that framing, because while I asked you the question in the context of a younger version of yourself, I'm working on all that stuff right now. And so is everyone listening today. I think this is a journey, isn't it? It's something that is in real time.
Absolutely.
When you think about this journey, I want to have you take a moment also to say what it is that you're grateful for. In terms of the opportunities that you've had, and in your personal and your professional life. This is something that many of us don't take a moment to pause and reflect on and share with others. And is often central to our drivers.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge list. Let me prioritize.
That's a blessing in itself. That right there, that's a blessing right there.
It's a huge list, I have to say. So definitely starting from family, both parents and brothers have had they've encouraged me at all points of time. I would even say they've taught me to be curious, taught me to be bold, taught me to have integrity, and taught me to have fun. So I think very important pieces, starting out on the journey. Tons of thanks to my sponsors and my managers, at my company. They've given me opportunity, which I would have not given myself if I was the older them. So I don't know how they took this bet, and I can't be grateful enough to them, for giving me the right problems to solve, and trusting me with the opportunity. So incredibly grateful. I am incredibly grateful to my peers because, while there is still so much they know ahead of me and more than me, they continue to brainstorm with me, knowing all of that, and they include me, in their thinking. Maybe they have to, but maybe they also don't have to. And there's so many ways they can punt me around and say, yeah, okay, I don't need to explain this guy this thing. Why is it important? But they take the time to do this. I'm just grateful for also the environment in our company. This is like the right place. Novartis is taking bold strides with digital and trying to reimagine medicine. And this is such a good place to be, and I'm lucky to be in this place and in this company doing what I do. So this is just let's say by the set of people. I'm also lucky to the university I went, and to the situations I've been in and my culture that have brought me closer to spirituality, that have shown me the diversity of lives that people go through. Coming from India, it's a very interesting country, whole spread of cultures and whole spread of, disparities as well as privileges. And I'm thankful to you, for taking the time to allow me to take the time to be grateful and be on this interview.
Well, I'm grateful to know you, to be learning from you, to be partnering with you, and to be able to share your observations, insights, both the pain and the purpose that you have had as a center part of your journey, because it's added up to a whole lot, and a very healing message, and I think an insightful one. So thank you so much for being on this program today. And we look forward to having future conversations and learning from you at every opportunity in the future. Thanks so much, Sid.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.